bodies and a few feet of ground.
It's strange not having the names underneath people's faces.
No.
Yes.
Claudia reminded us of the first thing she's been to since March 2020. So good to see everyone. Let's start with the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Rebecca Tarver, apologies.
And we are missing Sue.
Kelly gives her apologies.
Okay.
Because she can't make them.
Okay, great. And we're missing Joseph and that's it. Yeah. All right, great. So thank you for that. May I say welcome to Sarah Candia, who I've met on several occasions in connection with the Henley Environmental Action Plan. Sarah, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm very new to Henley, so I'm just going to put that out there. I moved in June 2021, although being passionate about the environment has been for decades something that I've been involved in. So I do work for a Christian faith-based conservation charity, hence why the link with the Henley Environmental Action Plan is something that I'm really excited about, getting other faiths involved with taking care of our planet. Since moving to Henley, I've had the pleasure of working with Greener Henley and Patrick in particular, so it's been really great to work.
We shouldn't minute that just in case.
And yeah, I think for me, caring about our environment and taking whatever steps we can to make a positive difference. And my hope is that exactly what this group is to do, given the recent COP26 talks.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. As Ian indicated earlier, we are in a position to co-opt you if you're willing, and if there's someone in the room who's willing to second that. Are you willing to be co-opted?
Yes.
Right. And Jackie's and Donna second. And this will then go forward to the planning committee for approval, okay?
Yeah.
But as of now, you've got a badge. Right. Are there
I
any?
find Henley environment is pretty similar to most others, and we're affected by climate change, like many other parts. So being new to Henley is nice to see a fresh pair of eyes.
Agreed. Are there any declarations of interest? No. In that case, let's move on to public participation. It is being live streamed, so be aware of that. But there are no members of the public in the room currently. So let's move on. And the minutes that you have in the agenda. Are there any issues that are not covered in the agenda for today, or any points you'd like to raise about the minutes themselves? No. In that case, I'm happy to sign them if you'd like to. And then we'll move on to the council's carbon footprint. Would you like to take that?
Yeah. So there are three different issues actually relating to the council's carbon footprint. The first was the briefing session for councillors and officers that many of you attended on the 26th of October, with presentations by Tony Patrick and myself. And to let you know that following that presentation, we've decided on a way to create a carbon baseline for the council, and we've got a spreadsheet, and that work has begun. And Tony and I will be meeting with the accountant later this month to talk that through. And we're going to run the baseline year with in a financial year. So from the financial year 1920, so that's ending in March 2020. So sort of the last pre-COVID year, if you like, will be our baseline, which we've subsequently learned using financial years in that way is consistent with the approach that the LGA are recommending.
Could you say the LGA is, please?
The Local Government Association. So we're consistent with the approach that they're taking. So then we want to move on, and from April 2022 start routine reporting of the council's carbon footprint, which obviously we can now compare with that baseline as we move on towards 2030 and to achieve the council's policy of net zero carbon. So I think that briefing session has kicked off some good carbon footprinting activities within the council, and we're moving forward with that. I don't know if anybody else wants to add.
I'll ask. What's your name? Kath. Just a comment about SIPA meeting.
Yes, Liz Jones, the accountant, and myself attended a SIPA webinar last Friday on how local authorities could measure their carbon footprint. I think it was maybe a bit more waffly than we were hoping for, but there was a talk from someone who has produced a spreadsheet that's been downloaded by 250 local authorities. It's the body, and I can't remember the name, is sponsored or organised. Local partnerships, thank you, Tony, by the Local Government Association, the Treasury and the Welsh Government. And so they've produced a spreadsheet specifically aimed at local authorities, which you can feed your figures in. You still need to do all the background work behind it, but then you can feed your figures in, and it will produce some nice graphs and things too for putting in reports. So I think it's really aimed at larger local authorities, but I think it could be quite useful for us as well. And I think that was the main thing. They've done quite a lot of research talking to other different countries and organisations about what they were doing. I think basically there was a thought that how you should measure your carbon footprint wasn't very joined up at the moment, but we have got this solution that would be useful, I think.
It is definitely useful. One of the questions is whether it covers all the sources of emissions that the council has. And I think this particularly relates to park services in terms of anything they may be using for gases or even pesticides, which might have carbon emissions related. As Fiona said, what we're doing is taking it at a committee level. And the reason for that is to ensure that we can identify where the main sources of emissions come from, and equally identify how we might be able to reduce them. Because instead of looking at a top level, we need to get down to a granular level. And that is quite an important task. And that I think is going to be a challenge for the council to be honest. Before we move on, any questions or
The training was video and is on, I'm sure it's available on the Town Council's YouTube channel. For anyone who wasn't there and might see it, Sarah.
we need, I think it's probably confidential, so we need to.
Is it?
Yeah,
Right.
normally you don't make it available.
We do, I think, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, we do the committees and subcommittees. Sorry, main committees and the full council. And then what we do for working groups or training.
The training sessions, they're normally just for staff and councillors,
Right.
but I can check with Sheridan. I can't see that there'd be anything
Yeah,
interesting
no,
in it. That's
This is going to go out on Henry Stanley.
Yes, I'm sure it would be fine. Members of the committee.
The other thing I was going to ask was the spreadsheet. Can you send that around? I'd like to see it.
You need to
As you
log,
say,
log on to it. And I logged on as Henley Town Council.
oh, right.
And what you find in it is that you recall I gave that handout. It's got most of the things that's in there. But if you go to the overview at the very beginning, you can choose the year in which you're actually calculating the carbon footprint. And the emissions change every year, particularly electricity, which compared to 2019-20 is currently about 20% lower because of renewables. So part of the drive for net zero will be through changing what we do in the council. But part of it also will be through emissions being changed, the factors. But could you send that to
Yes, I can
all
certainly,
the councillors?
yeah, send the
That's
spreadsheets
all right.
around so you can see the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And all it requires in any 1 year is to identify the sources of emissions and then put them into the column, and it automatically calculates it.
What I was thinking was that it's a general purpose, it's general purpose for councils anyway. That we may do things which aren't represented there, which
I think
if we could add them in would help
Yeah.
improve the sort of
Well,
representation of our footprint.
if there are things that the council does which are not included in terms of the source emissions, I've got the data for it, and I can help Fiona create an additional
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
that's what I was thinking. Even so, that might not be complete. I'm sure Sheridan and others will be able to think of things.
Yeah, well, this is why we need to talk to each of the council officers
Yeah, that's right.
and identify what they're actually using. Any other comments or questions? And why is it there's a gender gap?
What, lady this side? This is the best side.
Sorry.
Just a quick one, you mentioned about the baseline that you're calculating, and then you mentioned about regular reporting. How frequent will you be reporting progress or updating the figures? Is that
So-
an annual thing?
Yeah, so
In terms of
we'll
accountability?
we'll gather the figures. There'll certainly be an annual report to compare against the baseline, but exactly how we'll do things sort of month in, month out is what we need to work on. And I think what we want to try and do is make it as efficient as possible and use existing reporting systems as far as we can, because whilst the senior management team are very keen to do this, they're also mindful of the extra time that it will take. So we'll try and make it as efficient as we possibly can. But we're determined to start in April 2022 as a matter of routine.
As an example, for one of my clients, they have a subsidiary covering USA and Canada. I get monthly figures, but the client itself doesn't calculate its footprint apart from annually. But it's relevant for the subsidiary to monitor so they can see whether they're going on or off track. I think that's probably what might be helpful for the council committees to actually identify perhaps on a quarterly basis where they're at. But the first thing is getting the data. Okay. So that concludes that. Sorry.
Can I just one more question? When we put in the solar panels on the 3 council buildings back in 2011-12, Mike Kennedy, who was town clerk at the time, used to give 6 monthly reports on the various aspects of it, including return on capital invested, which was about 16%, I think, the last sort of, but also the number of kilograms of CO2 that we'd saved and so on. He used to write quite comprehensive reports, and it was a good way of emphasising that making Henley greener and more sustainable actually made us money, good investment, as well as improving our environmental credentials. So it's quite a good example of how we can present. People say, well, why are you doing it? Why are you wasting the council's time and energy on these things when it doesn't make any difference because China's got 10,000 coal power stations, and so it's a good counter to that argument. And we haven't had those reports for a few years now. It might be interesting to see if we can revive them.
In that respect, Patrick and I and Fiona have had discussions about those 3 buildings, and I have the data. I have a meeting scheduled at some stage to review with Liz Jones quite what is happening. And in that respect, Patrick and I want to go and look at the meter there to actually see how much is being exported. The context about exporting, because you have done a feed-in tariff, which is still valid, but that feed-in tariff is no longer the case, and there is an opportunity to export at an additional price as a benefit.
We got a very good deal on the feed-in tariff. It was before the coalition
44
government
pence.
abolished it in 2012.
Yeah.
So we got it in time.
Yeah.
And we'll get that good deal nowadays.
No, it's no longer there.
No, it was moved very soon afterwards. So I don't want to make any political points.
Right, can we then go on to an update on the RCEF, which is renewable, sorry, the Rural Community Energy Fund.
Yes,
and
so
application with council.
yes, so some good news on this application, which the town clock submitted earlier this year. We've been successful in our bid, and so have been awarded about £30,000 for feasibility studies and energy assessments of 6 of the council's buildings, including the town hall. I'll be meeting with Avico, the supplier that the councils were chosen to deliver these feasibility studies in the next few weeks. So well done to the town clerk for helping the council win that money, and we'll be starting with that work shortly.
And bear in mind, all of you actually participated in reviewing the tenders, and that was prior to his making a subsequent application. So I think well done everybody and the town clerk.
Really good news.
Right, let's go on then to the eco-business fair.
There was, sorry, Tony, if I could, there was one report on the council's energy contract.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Those
Yeah.
are in deadlines, yes. So yeah, just one more point under item 5. This was papers that came in only last week, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to send them out with your meeting documentation. But the accountant has received quotes on renewal of the the electricity supplies for the council, and she's hastily put together a paper for consideration by the Recreation and Amenities Committee next Tuesday. So that's Tuesday, the 23rd of November.
Yeah, it is.
And Donna will be there. Fantastic. She's going to recommend that the council adopts a contract with SSE Green Energy, who are 100% renewable supplier. They take their supplies from hydro and wind energy, and they are also verified by a scheme called REGO, which is Ofgem's renewable energy for government organisations or something.
Yeah.
It's the Ofgem, sorry, Renewable Electricity Guarantees of Origin, the REGO scheme. So it's if the council decides to go ahead with this recommendation, then we will get a certificate to say that we've got a REGO supplier, and we'll be able to use the logo for marketing purposes to say the council has met.
When you
that
go ahead
standard.
with that, can you also ask them what the carbon emissions are? Because although it's renewable, there are emissions associated with renewables. So we shouldn't assume we're going from 0.21 to 0. It'll be near 0.
Yes, there is. Yeah, I'll have a look at the information we've got. We may have that.
Any questions on the energy contracts?
Will you send it round to everybody, or will you notify everyone?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, if you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Happy to send that.
There is a fairly sizable price increase, just so you're aware.
About 50%.
But I think this is due to the actual global supply demand situation rather than the fact that it's renewable. I should imagine. Yeah. So you won't be able to get away from it, whichever contract you go. Yeah.
And this isn't a surprise for those of you that know Andy Tunstall, who was involved with us on Surrey Street. He moved from Hangbourne to Shropshire, Ironbridge, and he stayed with the same supplier, and his price with the same supplier went up by 50%. So it's not a or something that's just for
Yeah.
any town council.
Yeah.
Any other?
On the town council's position, the finance committee last week met with investment managers, and we approved our investment strategy, which changed the ethical, the ESG rating that we were instructing our investment managers to, reducing it from a range of 20 to 30 down to 25 or lower. In fact, it was, they're both already at below 20 in their current measurements of ESG. So that's come a long way. I can't remember, I'm trying to put my notes, but with me, whether or not we'd actually disinvested of all of the highly ethical ones. Can you remember, Kath?
I think we just had a couple left, didn't we?
Yeah, there was Rio Tinto, I think. And then, so there's the last two, which we're just, our investment manager is waiting for the right moment to dispose of. In other words, what we do, we do actually need to draw down some money in the future. So our ethical investment position has improved considerably since 2 years ago when we introduced it and went ahead with ethical investing, which is very much changed in recent years. It's very much swimming with the tide rather than against it.
It might be worthwhile thinking in that context, what is the carbon footprint of investments? If it's possible.
I haven't specifically asked about that in the past, but we could do, yeah.
I think it'd be worthwhile.
Yeah.
It may not be something you put in your carbon footprint, but it'd be analogous to
We had a very interesting discussion with them about how you measure ESG. You might have a company which in some aspects was very ethical. For example, in the not employing sweatshop labour, children, and so on. They might have a high carbon footprint, and so the ethical balance is actually complicated. It's not just about carbon footprint, but it would be useful to know if they provide things. Companies do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'll have a discussion with Liz and see if we can get there.
Okay, thank you for that.
Good.
Sorry.
No, I did mention to Sheridan when we were having the boilers, the gas boilers, which is down,
In Hockey Club.
yeah, and I said, why couldn't we use like hydropower, like down at the lot and stuff, but Sheridan said that would cost millions to have that installed, and we couldn't afford it. Because it seems a shame to not harness that.
It's, well,
Has that been decided now, the boiler replacement?
yes, it has.
I thought we were still thinking about
No,
it.
thank you. It was a very short term
Oh,
decision that
Yes.
we made.
right.
Well,
You did say it cost far too much. That
We
was-
looked into that scheme, didn't we? At some point in a bit of detail, I think, earlier in the year, the hydropower scheme.
not in terms of this location.
Oh, right.
And the reason I'm hesitating is I know that there's a discussion going on about hydropower at Marshlock.
Yeah, that was what I.
And I'm starting a discussion about Hammersmith as well. But that, the issue is, how far is it between the source of the hydropower and the user of the hydropower? You have to get a customer lined up, and where the hockey club is, that's probably a long way away.
It just seems such a waste resource we could use.
Tony, can I just add a comment there? The hydropower is day in, day out, 24 hour. So you need a load.
Yeah.
You need someone that demands that. So if you've got someone that say got air conditioning or
The swimming pool,
heating
swimming
or
pool.
a swimming pool, something which is have got a continuous load,
Or a supermarket.
or a supermarket, yeah, where they've got freezers and things like that, then that would work. So hooking up with Tesco would work.
Yeah.
But actually, the other problem that Ken whispered in my ear is load balance, that actually Marshall can only generate quite a limited amount of power simply because of the flow that the Environment Agency would allow us to take off the main flow. They will restrict it. And I think that Reading Hydro are taking about 40 kilowatts, and we might even struggle to do that at Marsh. So it's not as obvious when you start looking at the capital cost of running in a cable all the way from Marshlock up to the hockey club.
Right, okay, I thought I'd ask.
Could you ask a question?
Yeah,
That's right.
it is a question to ask, actually.
Right, any other issues on the carbon emissions, carbon footprints? In that case, let's go on to the eco-business plan, which has got a paper attached in a minute. Would you like to talk with them?
Yes, so Henley had its first eco-business fair this year, as you know, led by SODC. They are not able to run a fair in Henley again next year. They may well run one, but will select another location within their district next time around. So if we would like there to be another eco-business fair or similar kind of event within Henley, then it's something we would need to take the lead on, if that's what we wanted to do. So although the fair this year was led by SODC, it requires quite a lot of input from the town council, and Tony and myself, I think, attended between 7 and 10 meetings with them to sort different things out. And there's an awful lot of work around scoping and marketing and recruiting partners and working with others to kind of make this sort of event happen. So it's worth, considering what kind of resources we've got available to do that kind of work if we would like to run the eco-business fair again. I've included in the paper feedback from the people who are present and the other partners, so you can see the kind of responses that we got. And for the council, for example, the electric tractor and quad bike people were there, and so our parks team were pleased to be introduced to them and use the event as a chance to have a demo and following up with them. So there's been a link made there. So at table 3.3 of your report, which is on page 10, I've sort of summarised the kind of different options that came up in considering the event. And I suppose, so these aren't necessarily mutually exclusive options, but I think they raise the issues that come up in thinking about whether to run an eco-business fair in 2022. So whether to use the town hall and marketplace as we did this year, or perhaps just focus on the marketplace. Crucially, I think whether the event is focused on business to business interactions or business and then whether to use the Great Big Green Week, as was the case this year, to run the event in September, or perhaps have it at another time of year, or alongside one of Henley's existing popular events, which really attracts quite a lot of footfall. So there's several different options there to think about as the way forward. So really, it's over to you to decide, I think, whether you think the fair was a useful thing to do, and you can find resources. So if you would like to go ahead, I'd recommend appointing an organising committee this evening to start the work really quite soon, actually, planning next year, how you'd like to approach it.
Put in the context, the one in September was planned over about 8 weeks. It was ludicrously short. And I think Fiona's point about planning well in advance is very valuable. But let's have your comments. What do you think about it? What do you think about the options? What do you think about the fair?
It's good. But like it said, the people upstairs can't come down here to see the presentations. So maybe they can be held on a separate day, or which space. And there wasn't people really going upstairs. most likely if they're out in the marketplace and, unless we had some sort of marquee or something, so people can actually walk into it that way, but then it's the cost of the marquee. I think we should have the presentations on separate days, like an afternoon, like a Saturday afternoon or something, saying that there's going to be presentations. Maybe have like craft stores, eco craft stores outside or even upstairs, getting people with the signs like we do with that class to lure people in. Try it that way.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Even organising just 2 days for Greener Henley was a huge amount of work. Trying to get the marketing out. That was really, it's not even B2B or B2C. But I'd say that the advantage of being down in the marketplace is community engagement. And that's something that we've discussed in this group, wanting to do. And so it's not necessarily that it should be a B2C or a B2B. We could look at it quite differently, look at it as a community engagement exercise, and then think how we do that. I think the idea of having multiple seminars, talks, is a good one, because that's something that Greener Henley considered for Great Big Green Week. I don't think necessarily having this event over Great Big Green Week is not necessarily a good thing. And I'm say open, look, actually we should look at all parts of the year. Tying it to the May Fair, I think might trivialise it, simply because the May Fair is very much a recreational thing, whereas this is quite serious. And I think that we need to think about that as well. But obviously, Greener Henley would be interested in helping and supporting where we can. But that doesn't mean to say it has to be Great Big Green Week. No, I think when we look at all the options.
You could do something maybe say once a month, have a stall out in the market. Would you not just have people just stood out there a different, right, to, sorry.
I tried that. I tried suggesting that, and David McEwen turned around and said, "Are you going to man it? Because who are you going to get to stand out there month in, month out, come rain or shine, to man a stall on the marketplace?" And it's a moot point because it's really difficult to get volunteer support. If you've got an event, people rise to the occasion for an event because it's a one-off, and then they can relax afterwards.
What about a Thursday market day? You get more.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do. I wanted to have a stall on market day on Thursdays, and I got absolutely no support within Greener Henley, and they're people that have got commitment. So I think trying to get support from the town, and it would be really difficult for a regular thing, a regular event.
So, sorry, Jackie.
Oh, no.
I wasn't certain who was having.
It's the question I had is, what is the main objective of it? And I'm wondering if it's possible. I know any amount of scoping is going to take time, but given the context of post COP26 and the commitment that the UK government made about businesses, going net zero, I think we're on what I would describe as soft ground. Like now that hopefully the government has said some things and businesses will take notice, I wonder if there's the opportunity to do some scoping, for example, with the Business Henley Partnership, whatever it's called. It's like, what do you need? What do you want? What can the council help you with? How can we network and facilitate those conversations where needed? So I think understanding what the objective is, recognizing hopefully the more positive context that businesses are beginning to take up the climate care responsibilities. How do we meet them where they're at? That would be my
Jackie, sorry.
No, that's okay. I support both Patrick and Sarah's comments. I think that the aim of the next one should be focused on community engagement. And I think that could be at an event such as the May Fair. But only because I think we want to tie it with an event that is going to get more people into Henley. And then on top of that, would be layering what the business requirements are. I think that you could look to tie those elements into the next one.
Any other comments?
No.
Okay, yeah,
Sorry, are they doing a thing at the late night shopping? Still, that would be a fantastic opportunity.
We used to do it to the Twinning Association, and it was a brilliant money spinner. We used to make 500 quid a night there, but we would talk to one or two people that were interested in what we were doing. All people were there for was to have a good time, the kids to go on the waltzer and everything else, and to drink as much mulled wine as they
You
could.
could do a mulled wine store and have the information, get people that way.
But the people will just, I think you'll find, we have no success in following up, none at all. I think that's what I meant by trivialization. You know, you need to have people attracted to something which is focused, they understand it, and that's where the talks come in. I think, and maybe, you know what you said, is maybe every evening in the barn, there is another talk, you know, something about an aspect of climate change or about energy efficiency or retrofit for the homes or everything else, and you really publicize it. The great thing about the barn is you don't have to pay the costs of marquees, because going anything bigger than we did for Greener Henley, for a great recently, going to cost a fortune.
Yeah.
They cost thousands to hire.
Let me give some comments myself, because I was closely involved in it. First of all, the barn, that was an original plan for SWC until they realised there was no accessible, yeah, and they dropped it as a consequence. So that is one issue. My experience, and I stress it's my experience of that council meeting, is it started out having an objective of being business to business. It turned out there's very little communication, I think, really, between businesses and businesses. It was much more of a business consumer. And yet the conference sessions themselves were probably more able to be business to business. And I think if you're going to look at doing something that combines the two, then actually let's think about the conference sessions being business to business. But let's take on board the point about local involvement, local engagement. But the issue we need to think about is how do we do it and who's going to do it? Because there is a lot of involvement. There's an involvement to get the stand holders to come along. There's the involvement to manage it on the day. There's the involvement to communicate well in advance and on the day. And frankly, the communication, even though they had a communications officer or lead from SODC, the communications, I think, failed that session quite a lot. So I'm happy to take a vote on it, but we need to decide what we plan to do and actually decide then how we're going to do it. Yeah.
Sarah asked a good question, which was, what are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to talk to? And what are we trying to get them to do or not do? And maybe that should be the way we try and decide what sort of events to hold, if any. And the other question I've got is, it doesn't mention money here anyway, which we'd like you to want to spend.
It was a free event for attendees.
So what it cost us, I mean, I don't know if Fiona's time was hard to assess. But, are there any actual hard costs associated with these options?
Well, if we take the approach of the last event, it's largely on communications. There were there's design costs that we bore for the climate emergency and the neighbourhood planning group. But as far as I'm aware, there were no other costs.
No, I suppose it's room hire, you use the town hall
Yeah.
or marketplace.
well, we should go through the douche.
Yes, yeah.
So we're talking about a few hundred, haven't we? So in terms of, the next item on the agenda, it's relatively small amounts of. Yeah, okay, just checking.
Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
Officer time is the
Yeah.
key, because this was us organising our end of it, and already Fiona was overloaded with it, really, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was a lot more extra work than perhaps I'd initially thought, so I think it's fair to say as these things can.
Easy to overlook.
sometimes be, I mean, the only other costs were things they wanted to do, they did gift bags and things like that, but that's quite a trivial cost if you want to include those kind of things. I think, the main resource issue really is people's time, and as Kat says, venue hire, depending on what the location chose.
Well, the item 5 on Fiona's paper is the working group is invited to consider whether to run the Eco Business Fair in 2022, and if so, choose an event option and appoint an organising committee. So take the first point: should we run it?
We don't know. And I think the first thing we need to do actually is to get together and decide, do we want to run it? And then we have the data, we haven't got information here to make that base that decision on. So before I suggest that if a group of people got together, they would get together to try and work out the feasibility and suggest some objectives. I think without that, we can't really make a decision.
Okay.
The problem with all this, Chairman, and it was like the joint Henley and Herts and neighbourhood plan, which has been going on for 3.5 years now. We finish up with that.
What?
Exactly.
Empty chairs.
Oh, sorry.
And
There isn't anything there.
everybody wants to complain after you've made decisions, but nobody seems to be prepared to come along and get involved. And I think this is the problem, and it's not just this one, there's other ones as well. Everybody wants to do the right thing, but are they really keen enough to get involved to do the right thing? And there lies your problem.
Yeah.
It's a very small minority, with obviously this committee and obviously the people that are really involved with this. Everybody's going to talk about it. We've all been talking for the last 2 weeks about the COP26. And I see all these youngsters on the streets and that, but what are they doing? Other than carrying placards, I don't know what they're doing. And this is the problem here. You're trying to do things, but are there people out there that are prepared to come and take it on and do things? That's their logic problem. But it's not just this, it's the joint Henley and Herts and neighbourhood. It's a prime example. We've been having open meetings now for a long, long time. And if we get one person out there, we're doing pretty well.
It's like Ken said, people will complain on social media, but when it comes to actually doing it, that's the problem we have. People just want to complain, but it's the effort of coming to visit. People need to stand up and attend meetings if they want to make a difference.
Okay, Nadia?
Further on those notes, when I manned the store on one of the days, handing out these leaflets about how to 10 tips how to reduce your energy usage and so on, I would say 9 out of 10 people wasn't aware what they should be doing, what the easy steps are to save a little bit of energy. And I think now with the prices being on average 50% higher, people will get their bills in the next few months, showing a significant decrease. And I think the objective should be to teach the community, provide real hands-on information to the community as to how they can increase their energy efficiency. I've said this so many times before in my street in St. Mark's, a zillion houses just got their Victorian single glazing, and they say, well, yeah, but it's a conservation area, we can't do anything. Well, actually, you can do quite good quality second. So anyway, so I think that should be the objective. Engage the community and give them real tips as to how they can be helped. and choose an event that fits with that.
Yeah, Joe, I think you're absolutely right there, what you're saying. The question is, what's in it for me? And it's like when we go canvassing, not that we're going to get political at the moment in time, you knock on the door and the question is, what's in it for me? You know, what do I need to come out and vote for? You know, what are you going to give me? And I think you're right. You know, if you could show 10 items where you could say £20 a week, God, that's all, you know, we all want to get onto that. So that's probably the best way forward. You know, what's in it for me if I come to your store?
Patrick?
I'd like to relate the experience that we had on Great Big Green Week, because around that time we were in the marketplace. And I think that our 2 days, we did a Sunday and then a Saturday, were actually very successful. And not everyone that came on the stand and talked to the various people there were in it what they could make out of it. I think there were quite a few people that came on, well, I know there were, to talk to us, who actually wanted to give something. So I think there is an appetite to get involved, and there is an appetite. It's just a relatively small number of people at the moment. I think that will gradually change as the dawning realization of what mess we're in as it comes. But what I would say, and what I've already offered, is that Greener Henley's got to decide what it's going to do next year and when it's going to do it, and whether it does it as part of Great Big Green Week or whether it does it at another time. But I think we're enthused by the success that we had, and we're enthused by the fact that being in the marketplace put us in the right place and got us the right people coming to talk to us, that we'd like to share that. And I think there's an opportunity to make it a week-long event, not full pressure, not enormous, opening up the town hall every day, but a week of events, and have some of those events that will be run by the climate working group. And that could be a series of seminars, or it could be, I don't know what it would be, but I think that there's a possibility then to share publicity and the possibility to actually get more clout with the public, particularly. With businesses, it won't quite work like that. I think businesses, the council probably will do well on their own, but with the general public, I think Greener Henley has got the ear of quite a few people, and I think that we've got an opportunity there to share that and for the and do something that's synergistic.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that we follow Patrick's earlier comment about viewers getting together and determine what we want to achieve and what's the best way of delivering it. Because taking your point, Claudia, in terms of residential properties as an example, that is somewhat different to what was the Eco Business Fair in its width.
Yes.
So I think who would like to be involved in looking at the objectives of an Eco Business Fair? So that's Dora, Claudia, Sarah, Patrick, and I'll be involved as well. And you can be participate as well. And let's set up a discussion first, which would be a lot more open. But perhaps this discussion could be, given the fact it's been recorded publicly. Let's go on. Sorry.
Can I just ask, the group considers initially who we're trying to talk to and what we're trying to change about their mindsets and the behaviour in pursuit of the climate change objectives.
Great time. All right. So let's move on then. Sorry, we have
It is about educating people, small lifestyle changes, because people just are not aware of how much money you could save by doing simple things, and they're just not aware of things. And I think we do need to educate them.
but that may be another fair, if you like.
Yeah, or we could get Naomi, I could give her some tips on how to do,
Let's
and she could put it out on the website.
very helpful to have that discussion, but I'm conscious of
Yeah,
time.
I know, sorry.
So let's move on to the next. And as I said, if you can organise a meeting with the people who agree with you. Is there any times you can't manage it?
Mornings.
mornings you can't manage here
Yeah,
again.
like from 2 o'clock is usually good for me.
So good at school. Claudia, would you like to pick this up?
Yes, so we had a discussion in the working group as to whether now might be a good time to perhaps propose to Gillets what they could be considering for a new school in terms of perhaps alternative solutions. Well, I don't know what they're considering at the moment, but I'm presuming there might be some sort of conventional building, but perhaps to put some information for them together as to what's happened in this area with regard to new schools, maybe give them an overview of certain case studies that they can look at, and then perhaps even talk to, say, 3 green investment banks to see what schemes there are available to have these, say you build a passive house concept school, what would be the options to finance this, given that you will actually save much money on reduced annual maintenance and on energy bills. So this is typically what's happening with the sort of energy strong concept, which is where a house gets a deep retrofit that costs, say, £50,000, and this is then paid for over a period of, say, 30 years by this householder paying a fixed amount, which he or she would otherwise pay in terms of energy and maintenance. So that is a sort of scheme that you could consider, but I haven't spoken to any green investment banks, so I don't know. So this is really, I think, for us to discuss, would that be something I could be doing, given that they haven't actually given their permission for it? Because obviously I can't ask for this on behalf of them, because I'm not part of their organization. So really just asking for some feedback on how we could possibly do that and whether it'd be useful.
Any thoughts on what Claudia is suggesting?
I suggest actually going straight to saying that there should be opportunities to raise finance if you follow these principles. Give your example of what's happened in Holland, and that there are banks that already do this. You might use existing examples to illustrate that. But I think the 2 people to persuade, one is the head and the other one is the board of the governors. And both have got to come to agreement before it can go anywhere. So I think we probably upset the head of the chairman of the governors by not accepting more houses. So, but it puts him in a difficult position, because he told us that he can't fund the retrofit that they need without extra houses. He's not getting the extra houses, so he's got to find another way of funding it. And if we can go in there and say, look, here's a way you can fund it, by green investment, if you follow these principles, that I think would be a lifeline for them.
This is more an offer from Climate Emergency Working Group to the school to say that there is expertise and knowledge with some people who are members in this group that would be like, would be shared with the school for them to see if that's of any use to them.
Any other thoughts?
Well, the only thing with this is, they've been discussing this for 3 or 4 years now, maybe even longer. One would imagine they've got a plan A or a plan B, either retrofit or build new. And they must have figures for both of them. One would imagine it's been going on so long. I can't believe they're just going to sell the land and say, oh yeah, we've got X amount of money, what can you do with it? One would have thought the plan's already there. So yeah, meet with them.
Could you perhaps, sorry, Joseph, welcome.
Sorry, just to pick up on the point. Obviously, there's the chair of governance that also, I believe there's actually a committee behind the land sale part of the way, so it's pretty worth engaging with all four members of that group potentially, rather than just relying on an individual's reaction. So they have different perspectives.
Yes. And do we have access to them via Kath, or who holds the contacts with the school?
I have contacts with the chair of governance and with the head teacher. But I don't know about the background committee.
I think what should be happening is that perhaps you could draft a letter, stroke approach, that the Catholic need to see. And then let's submit it. And taking Jackie's point, it's an offer. And they will have to decide whether they want to proceed. Are you happy with that?
Who should the letter come from? Should the letter come from you, Tony, or from the Capital Officer, or from Michelle as Chair of Plans that we report to?
Do you have a view on
Clear
that?
who's best? I'm not sure the answer to the question.
I thought maybe you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's from this group.
It is from this group, yeah.
thank you very much.
I think that's
Anytime.
Right. Is that all right?
I'll take that as an action.
Okay, let's go on to the paper which is on the budget. Reallocating funds. This is, would you like to talk us through now? Comments? This is on page 19.
Yes, so this is a proposal to reallocate funds within the Climate Emergency Working Group's budget. And that's because the cost of energy assessments has increased. And so we know that without the energy assessment, it's not possible for the council to give a grant for the kind of improvements that people might want to apply for. So explains that we'd like the planning committee to approve a request to reallocate £3,000 from the grants budget line into the energy assessments budget line, so we can make progress with those activities.
And the reason why the energy efficiency audits have gone up is because they're no longer receiving government funding. And the consequence, what we want to do is to make more energy audits available to local community buildings. And in fact, we have a few already targeted, but what I'd like to do as well, is perhaps publicize that within this current financial year, we have budget available for energy audits, and that should be more proactive. So that is a request to approve it in this committee, and then go to the planning committee to be finally approved. Any comments?
Just to be clear, this is changing the allocations, spending plans for this financial year, 21 to 22.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember what we'd asked for in 22, 23.
I don't think that's been finalised yet.
What's gone into the current budget? Maybe I'm asking the question wrong time.
I think so. It's a similar total amount, but I'm not sure if it's been allocated into different categories in the same way.
So the same total amount, but we can do that. I was just wondering if this discussion might impact on what we want to claim for 22, 23.
It could do. The grant to undertake improvements relating to energy efficiency audits is a matched funding approach. Certainly in 22-23, if we can get more energy audits completed this year, then there may be a request for grants for next year.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to play that by ear. It's one of the challenges and I've looked at an energy audit which was completed in July. One of the challenges is actually to get the building owners to step up and to fund some of the efficiency improvements that are recommended. And you said we've had challenges, Joseph, in 2 or 3 areas.
This seems a sensible proposal, but the budget, the 2022-23 budget is sort of more is coming up to its final cycle.
Yeah.
Between January and 4th, and we have to approve it. So if this discussion means that we should be asking, if we're expecting a greater amount of energy audit requirements, we'd like to bump up to next year's, there's still time to do that. This is probably the last meeting where we can do that. So, but again, the proposal for this year seems fine.
Okay. Let's take on board that comment and review it in terms of 2023. But everyone's in favour of going ahead with this proposal? All right. The statement of actions and achievements. What the informal working group realised is actually we haven't been very good at publicising what we've achieved. And this is a statement going back to its inception. What we'd like to do is actually perhaps publish this as it stands, but every 6 months talk about what we've achieved. Because I think it's important that the community is aware of the fact that we are taking actions, and sometimes they're quite long-winded. Best description is the first one, which is the talk about EV electric vehicle charging, which has been going on for some time. But I think what's important is that the community realise that action is being taken, if not necessarily decisions at that time. So that's what our plan is. Are there any comments on the document you have in page 23 to 25?
We delivered input into the neighbourhood plan, didn't we? Is that in there somewhere?
Maybe. If it's not, we can certainly put it in.
Can we add it?
Yeah.
We've also supported the YMCA in terms of re-insulation of the wall, which is a community space. Supported them as well as tangible delivery.
Supported Peter as well, matched funding to the grant that we got from the government.
So it's great to kind of see bigger regional kind of acronyms that people don't necessarily have familiarization with. But things like D2 and YMCA are very much things that as a community we do recognise, and we have been making a difference on our doorstep.
So that's grant plus energy audit. Okay. And
we've made small steps on the trees as well, mapping. Kath put a lot of effort into that. Trying to think what else. I don't think actually the climate work group has funded any tree work, is it? Not yet.
we already requested £500.
Yeah, which I've got to sort out the invoices for this. So we will be funding, helping to fund the garden trees.
Well, let's put that in going forward. I think what that highlights is we've got to be aware and think on our feet about when this communications, we need to, that should be taken in different communication.
Does it include, it might do, the efforts put into communication, so all the newspaper articles, Facebook, things put on the website? I might have missed it, but I think that's actually a major contribution, isn't it?
Okay.
You can't necessarily measure it in terms of output, but you could say, 12 articles in the
Certainly,
paper.
think about the articles that.
That Rebecca's
did.
done, 12 articles, so many posts on Facebook.
Okay, all it'll be there is saying that we started to improve our communications. We won't be noting every one individually. But I think that's important to do it.
Yeah, and the website.
Any other comments?
Did you contribute?
I'm sorry.
Right, so I think I'm just going back to your comment about do we publish this as is. I'm just going to go back to what is our objective? What is it we're trying to achieve? This would be a wonderful way to try and fill some of those empty spots. And, you know, so perhaps something around could have a communication plan about what are some of the great things that we want to communicate when. If I may just share briefly, so before I moved to Henley, I was in Richmond, and there was a project initiative with the council and with a similar kind of Green Henley group, which was called the Richmond Biodiversity Action Plan. And we had a launch event with David Attenborough, who's a local resident. You know, there was really, really good collaboration. But what that meant was that there was this really handy little pamphlet that people could access on the council website. It was really aimed not only at like the parks, but also people's residential gardens to say biodiversity crisis matters. Here's some things that you can do. And just thinking about the plan around the tree planting, you know, if there are some nuggets in there about, you know, how do we decide, how do we help habitats, you know, thrive and flourish? Just that would be a really nice way of communicating and sharing some of the expertise that we have in this room. It has a really tangible outcome and has a really positive impact on habitats.
Naomi, who's our communications manager, she's very good at putting things
Yeah,
out.
but we have to tell her what we want.
Yeah, we have to tell her. She's very.
You know, she's a support, and I think this is a good point about the communication plan. Just think on it.
Amazing stuff that you've done. Like it's really great. And how you communicate that can be a real.
Yeah, well, we haven't been communicating. That's the point. And I think that's our
Yeah.
point.
Well, celebrity endorsement always works, doesn't it? And it's made some-
So,
Yeah.
let's-
There are some well-known people that have got involved, not directly with this, but there's Ben Fogel, there's people like Vermont, sorry, so what people's name. You know, there are organisations, there are people that we could approach to help us communicate better what's happening that are local to here. Because what you want is a communication plan, and what you want from that is engagement for more people to get involved. Yeah, that's what I'm understanding.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really practical, you know, paper leaflet that I use to try and connect with the gardening landscape things. Like, how are you gardening? How are you doing these landscaping that fits in with the fact that Richmond has declared a climate emergency? We have a Richmond Action Biodiversity Plan. How are you overlapping the two as part of your business?
And it's kind of, how do you transform this here to something that is going to be seen and understood by the person on the street and engage them?
Right.
There's a really interesting one that's flying right under the radar at the moment, and that is that Kyle is pushing the council wherever he can to plant perennials rather than annuals. It reduces costs to the town council. It reduces the carbon footprint because you aren't throwing away all that peat compost every year with the plants that you put in. And it's a great initiative. And I think that if one could do a bit of an assessment in terms of carbon, as well as finance, the publicity on that would be really good.
Agree.
And that's the kind of thing, it's not just us, it's the fact that the stuff that the council is doing, which isn't being, it occurred to me at the time, it's stuff that they're not being shouted at. The reason it came up was because of the golf course.
Rent golf.
Yeah,
Which sometimes terrible.
yeah, and Carl was sharing his planting with us.
Yeah.
He talked about what he was trying to achieve, and it's great stuff. I think that, you know, that's something that could be, hopefully, as I said, in the impact assessment, for that, when that comes to committee, there should be a report on just what sort of impact it's having. And then sort of some good publicity around it. And it's a good for him as well to get the application, because he's doing a good job.
Actually goes back to how we publish the carbon footprint. And that's better, and how we draw back. Sorry.
I just wondered if there has been an achievement around the council going peat free. Peat free. Is that an easy win?
It's not an easy win. A case in point, again, with this, they're buying from nurseries, and at the moment it's incredibly difficult to buy trees. And you can't, if you start saying no peat in the pots that you're buying your trees in, you probably won't end up buying any trees at all. So it's actually very, you know, it's nuanced, but it's really challenging. It is happening, I think, and it'd be interesting to see what they're doing. I can't report on what they're doing, but I'm just saying that the environment they're working in is quite a challenging one. But yeah.
Okay, so let's agree that, sorry.
I was going to ask, did we make any inputs in the process of registering footpaths? See that here. I thought we. Yes.
No, we didn't.
Okay, maybe we should have done.
There's the actually good strategy group.
I was trying to remember, it might have been that group that I'm thinking of, where we were looking at it.
I like the
Because
strategy.
there's a
which will have
deadline
action
of about
achievements
5
as
years'
well.
time. There's a deadline of about 5 years' time, and the footpaths aren't registered by then. You won't be able to register in about 5 years. And I thought we'd, never mind.
No, I don't think
I discussed it in some group. I think Patrick's right. That's the transport.
Can I suggest that perhaps we ought to think about having these actions and achievements for both transport strategy and climate emergency, because they didn't link.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, we could put it that we've supported the transport strategy group with ideas by having cross membership. So you could argue, you know, 20-mile-an-hour zones or crossings are done to improve the town for pedestrians, which is obviously a good thing, and hopefully cyclists and so on as well.
Should we discuss that in our next meeting?
Yeah, we should, but actually, I think what we should do is actually ask Fiona to take back this document and review it with them and see how you want to communicate it. And separately, we should be thinking about communication.
But I meant talking about that footpath registration. Is that not something we're doing? Is that something that?
Well, I think that's the thing. What I suggest is that you speak to the officer in charge and say, could that be put on the agenda of the next transport strategy group?
But how do we then know that?
So
Well, some of us are on the transport strategy group, Patrick is as well.
Yeah.
the
Also
transport
Jerry,
strategy group discussed recommendations from the Civic Society regarding footpaths, and that's how it was dealt with. That's the discussion that I recall. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
the notes.
it was discussed. I can't remember.
Let's discuss it at the next meeting. But the next informal meeting.
I'm only mentioning it because I do quite a bit of trail running, and I've discovered so many footpaths over the last 18 months that I had no idea existed, and it'd be quite beneficial to have a little map for people to see where they are.
Glenn, is Glenn on Walkers are welcome?
Sorry?
Glenn,
He used to do
Lambert, he's on Walkers are
Yeah.
welcome, he might.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I don't
Well,
know what
Ladies
it
and
is.
gentlemen, this is actually outside the subject
Sorry.
discussion, so let's close it.
Yes.
Let's take that statement of actions and achievements. You to decide how you want to publicize it, you have a few others, but also let's think about how we take on board some of the actions, achievements from the conflict strategy as well, and then the communication plan. So it's then the date of the next meeting.
I wanted to suggest Tuesday, the 18th of January.
That's fine.
In a particular year.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that, please?
Is that going to be daytime again? Daytime and face to face usually.
Yeah.
That's the change.
Yes.
Well, who knows?
Well, I know, yeah.
It's far too early
We've got to
to
get through
know
Christmas.
Would that be?
I have a board meeting
Oh, that's
on Tuesday, 4 o'clock, 18th, so I can't manage that. Donna could run it.
Oh, God, no.
Change it
It'll
here.
be over in 10 minutes. It'll be over in 10 minutes. I can guarantee you that. I'm sure it's
I can manage the Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay. What about the Monday then? Perhaps? Monday the 17th?
Monday's probably
Yeah.
slightly better. for the season.
Monday's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
It's
good.
not after full council, is it? Because we have a chairs meeting at 4 on a Monday. Full council.
It's planned as the next day. Full council is on the 4th, yeah, that's right.
So it's all right, so it's not going to have a chairs meeting.
For the 17th of January.
What time?
I guess it's 4 o'clock. Sorry,
3 o'clock again or?
Yeah, Monday's not too bad.
so what time is it?
2, 3,
3's better than 2.
3, 10, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
3 o'clock.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for freezing to death.